County CBS News.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240. Live from Chattanooga, Tennessee, it's Nooganomics with David Tulis.
Probably one of the most just judges in Chattanooga and Helmand County is Jeff Atherton, who represents the interest of the people and equity in Chancery Court. He's one of two Chancery Court judges in Helmand County. And according to the Chattanooga Times-Free Press today, in today's editions, is being tutted by an ethics board that has taken up the cudgel, if you will, of poofter gay orthodoxy. And the subject of this reprimand is an opinion that an order that he issued in the Baumgartner versus Baumgartner divorce case that was noted in reporting not too long ago, but just after the gay Obergefell decision came down out of Washington, the ostensible reconstruction of American law on the point of marriage, that said marriage is not a state issue, as the Windsor decision had said prior to it, but in fact is a federal issue. And we, the federal government, are going to take this issue away from the people and the states and impose a deconstruction of marriage by opinion. All right, this is the ruling in Obergefell highlights the whole danger, the whole peril of allowing kind of a cross attack from from federal jurisdiction into the states, where something is destroyed but nothing is built. And with biting language, with a bit of sarcasm, Judge Atherton, concerned about equity and fairness in his role as a Chancery Court judge, declared that there is now a parallel jurisdiction in the marriage field of law coming from Obergefell, when the feds reach over into the states, throw a little bomb with a little bomb blown up, and now expect the states to run their marriage regimes, run courts, and handle through statute relations that touch on marriage, even though marriage has been deconstructed. So the feds threw a bomb into Tennessee, let off the explosion, which was the issuance of the Obergefell pro-gay, pro-homosexual opinion, and now expect the states to proceed as before. And Judge Atherton, with wit, with sharpness, in Baumgartner, declared that it's not possible to do that. We really can't go on as before with this negative jurisdiction, the negative jurisdiction implied in the Obergefell decision. So what's happened to Tennessee law? How can we don't know what marriage is? Marriage is anything that anybody wants it to be. Well, how do we know what's not marriage? How do we know when marriage ends? What are the terms? What are the terms of law left to Tennesseans and to judges? How do we know what's left to us with which to judge a particular fact base, right? Because in court cases, you have a fact base, and then the ruling takes place in terms of either the law or equity. In a Chancery Court, that's equity is fairness, right? The law in equity. Well, just back up for a second. Equity courts, Chancery Court is one where the law often is between the combatants, right? The law would be, let's say, a contract or a promise of some kind that's been violated. These are not statutes that are at issue, but they're private arrangements, right? So the job of equity, the job of Chancery, is to find out what the law is in the facts. So sometimes there is no external law, there's no statute that can be appealed to, no rule, no state law, no federal law, no ordinance, just an agreement, right? So the agreement then has to be properly understood in relation to the parties, and then the judge makes a decision. So that's why sometimes we can't say that there's a law, but there's a law in the facts, and that is often it's a contract of some kind, right? It's a contract dispute, an arrangement, a promise, or a tort, a wrong based on particular facts. So when we have marriage, though, marriage in Tennessee is under statute. So presumably decisions that are made by courts reflect the law, but do not overturn the entire structure. And that's what Judge Atherton, who has a stake in this as a judge, is pointing out. And the story in the Chattanooga Times Free Press today, headline: Board reprimands judge who cited gay marriage ruling in refusal to grant divorce. And so the Bumgartners were denied a divorce of their statutory marriage. The board in question is the disciplinary council issued a news release. This is a state office that looks at judges and their proper upholding of the law and their proper appearance. Right, the appearance matters as much as what is rightly or wrongly actually said by the judge. And Atherton says, with the U.S. Supreme Court having defined what must be recognized as marriage, it would appear that Tennessee's judiciary must now await the decision of the U.S. Supreme Court as to what is not marriage, or better stated, when a marriage is no longer a marriage. So if they've redefined marriage, reconstructed marriage, they also have to give some indication he is suggesting of what is not a marriage, what is divorce. The majority's opinion, he says, in Obergefell, regardless of its patronizing and condescending verbiage. Okay. Judge Atherton is having some fun in this ruling. Is now the law of the land, he says, accurately described by Justice Scalia, one of the dissenters, as a naked judicial claim to legislative, indeed super legislative power. That's in the dissent. Thus, it appears there may now be at minimum, and obviously without any specific enabling legislation, concurrent jurisdiction between the state and federal courts with regard to marriage and divorce litigation. In other words, he's saying if there's a parallel jurisdiction in divorce now because of Obergefell, then should this perhaps be held in this divorce handled in federal court, right? If there are concurrent jurisdictions, two jurisdictions running parallel to each other, why is it necessarily here? Perhaps even more troubling, he says, however, is that there may also now be a new or enhanced field of jurisprudence, federal preemption by judicial fiat. And he puts quotes around that because that's a kind of a fighting word, right? Judicial fiat is something that Judge Atherton, who is a conservative, he is a conservative, constitutional-minded Christian man, right? If you don't know that, those are the facts. Preemption, being based on the Supremacy Clause, has generally been affected by the U.S. Congress through federal legislation. Further, there is, or there at least once was, a presumption against finding preemption of state law in areas traditionally regulated by the states. He's pointing out that Obergefell overturns the previous order. I'd say the order that still exists, but which we all pretend has been overturned, including every lawyer in Chattanooga has to pretend that that's what happened. Every lawyer has to pretend that Obergefell, which destroyed marriage and is part of the long decapitalization process here in Hamilton County in Tennessee, is the law. They all say that. Atherton goes on to say, regardless of this presumption and regardless of states' traditional regulation of the area of marriage and divorce, and regardless of what might now arguably be concurrent state and federal jurisdiction to address those issues, what actually appears to be the intent, and more importantly, the effect of the Supreme Court ruling is to preempt state courts from addressing marriage and divorce litigation altogether. In other words, if Obergefell is true that there's been a preemption against the state by the feds, well, then how can divorce be a state issue? How can it be a state issue, he's asking. The presumption of concurrent state court jurisdiction is overcome by a clear incompatibility between state court jurisdiction and federal interest. He goes on to say, perhaps Tennessee's perspective concerning keystones and central institutions must submit to the perspective of those so much higher and wiser than ourselves. You see, again, Jeff Atherton is having a little bit of fun in the predicament that the federal government has created for itself and all the people, a predicament that affects even you, my listener here at AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. And this is David Tulis, and I do thank you for giving me just a couple of minutes of your time. You think maybe we're going into the legal weeds here, but really we're not. Judge Atherton is defending the principle of local economy and the free market. He's defending the idea of a free government, of a free people, whose interests are protected by the government and protected by the state. Of course, we know that these ideals are not much honored by anybody anymore. No one expects them to be honored, especially state actors, He says, interestingly, the Constitution is barely mentioned, let alone overruled by Obergefell. In fact, the only reference to Tennessee Constitution Article 11 at 18 in Obergefell, this court has located, is in one of the opening paragraphs, not in the holding of the decision. One would think that if the Supreme Court intended to overturn all or part of the state's constitution, it would do so expressly rather than by implication. So Judge Atherton is appealing in his case, in his ruling here, by saying that how do we know what's real anymore? How can we know what's real with Obergefell? The conclusion reached by this court, he says, is that Tennesseans corporately have been deemed by the U.S. Supreme Court to be, and here again is where he gets into trouble, to be incompetent to define and address such keystone central institutions such as marriage, and thereby at minimum contested divorces. Of course, that's the case in front of him, is a contested divorce. Consequently, he says, since only our federal courts are wise enough to address the issues of marriage and therefore contested divorces, it only follows that this court's jurisdiction has been preempted. In other words, he's saying the high court's opinion has emasculated Chancery Court, has made it a testicular body, a testicular organization, a court that cannot manfully interpret the law. The majority of opinion represents social transformation without representation, he says, again, quoting the conservative judge Scalia. It also appears, Judge Atherton says, to have removed subject matter jurisdiction from this court. As a result, the complaint and the counterclaim are dismissed. So in those few sentences there, early on in a decision that runs, let's see, about 10 pages, he explains why he's dismissing the divorce case. He says, although this court has some vague familiarity with the governmental theories of democracy, republicanism, socialism, communism, fascism, theocracy, and even despotism, implementation of this apparently new super-federal judicial form of benign and benevolent government termed critocracy by some and Judy idiocracy by others, because that's what got the complainants right there. Judy idiocracy by others, with his iron fist and limp wrist, represents quite a challenge for a state-level trial court. In any event, it should be noted that the victory of personal rights and liberty over the intrusion of state government provided by the majority opinion in Obergefell is held by this court only to have divested subject matter jurisdiction from this court when a divorce is contested. In other words, well, we have in that moment ago, I read that phrase, the iron fist and the limp wrist. That kind of language from an honest judge, an honest judge, Jeff Atherton, is getting him into trouble. But Jeff Atherton can take the limp-wristed critique, I think, of this tut-tutting from an anonymous complainant who along with the judge, has authority to publicly speak about this matter. No one else can do it except the complainant, probably some attorney, perhaps a judge, or Jeff Atherton. This is all done in secrecy, right, behind the judicial veil. And the faithful constitutional judge who's just had enough, he's had it up to here, if you will, he is being rebuked. And I think we can understand that our protection here in Hamilton County in Chattanooga, and even where you are, if you, my listener, are from a faraway place, even your protection is best handled and best kept by men such as this, who are having a bit of fun. I mean, he knows he's on, when he wrote this opinion, he knew he was treading dangerous ground. He knew there would be repercussions. Judge Atherton realized that his ruling, once it made the airways, would bring national attention to him and his high court, the High Court of Chancery. And it did. And now we have this this scold, the kind of perfunctory scolding of this judge, who is duly elected by the people and who represents the people And we have to understand it. He represents, I would say, as every judge does, he represents the interest of God. God has an interest not in security. No, God has an interest in justice, and that's what courts are supposed to deliver. And they are, whether it's Mike Little seeking criminal court judge or Judge Greenholz, the man who was trying to hold on to the seat assigned to him by the governor in criminal court here in Hamilton County. These judges and Judge Atherton have a duty before God to issue and to find justice. Again, that is something that is forgotten on by most judges, and I think partly because the nature of the state has changed so drastically in the past 7,500 years to be a state of positive law. We have judges who are somehow trying to be just when the cases before them are of no crimes at all. They're often the crimes which are named against the accused are not sins. They're crimes. They're paper offenses. They are violations of they're acts of mala prohibitas as opposed to mala in se. Mala in se means in Latin an evil within itself, like a murder or a rape or a beheading are evils in themselves, right? They're evils by themselves. Mala prohibitas are simply bad things. Mal is like malady, right? Or malinvestment. Mal mean bad things by prohibition. They're not inherently evil. They're just bad because someone said they're bad. Someone in a General Assembly said it's bad, and we're going to make it a crime to do a certain thing. This is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio, the station where you report and the world decides. We think that we can serve you very greatly by being a multimedia platform. I'm the editor of Nooganomics.com, our main sponsor. That's Nooganomics.com. And Duke Nukem has a fine piece out there this morning at Nooganomics.com describing federal statute and the efforts by our weeping federal president to save lives by commercializing and turning into a merchant every seller of a firearm, eviscerating the private and free market in the traffic of weapons, which is certainly a very fine and honorable thing. If you own a weapon, you have a right as a property right to trade that weapon for cash, to trade it for something else, to trade it for a different weapon. These are all part of your constitutional rights under the Second Amendment and under the Tennessee Bill of Rights. We are brought to you by Wimpy's Restaurant, the place that has the about the finest brisket, the finest barbecue going in Saudi Daisy, just opposite Town Hall. There's a great table at the front where all the old timers with their ball caps and their overalls eat breakfast. They eat their omelets and their eggs and their bacon. Sometimes they come back for lunch and find out what's happening in City Hall. If it's on Tuesday night, they're all there. What's going to happen in City Court tonight, which is every Tuesday under Judge Marty Laz. A great crowd of common folk there, oppressed by their accusers in the state. For many of them, again, paper offenses, offenses against custom and tradition, not inherent evils. Wimpy's is the place where a lot of these things are discussed, right? And you can go there to enjoy the great food. That's Wimpy's. It's well worth the ride up to Saudi Daisy. If you are not from Saudi Daisy, you should go there and enjoy deeply Southern food and deeply Southern common conversation of the best of the most ordinary kind of American, and that would be the residents of Saudi Daisy who eat there at Wimpy's. They know a good place just opposite City Hall, and you'll enjoy eating out there. Also, I want to make sure that you know about Trade Bank of Chattanooga, where we are members, and find that in Trade Bank we are enjoying the smarter way of bartering and improving our cash flow. We trade among 400 local businesses in every field using Trade Bank dollars by debit card. Learn more. Call Jürgen Mutz, the German with the Southern twang, right? And his number is 877-2202. Find out what Trade Bank can do for you. 877-2202. We say love your neighbor and buy local. The story about the lawsuit filed by the good people in Washington against Volkswagen, I think is worth noting because it helps make our argument, as we sometimes like to repeat and remind ourselves. It makes the argument for local economy and the free market. Think of the danger to a large company whose share value has gone down from it's gone down from about $50 a share in August to now about $28 a share. It's down about half. Well, that's certainly not lethal to Volkswagen at all, but it suggests how we are vulnerable when we have large players and when we count on large players. When their sales of Passats plunge in a given month by half, well, it's suddenly we're all worried about it. Well, if you have thousands of small businesses as opposed to a handful of large ones, the fortunes of any one company going south are not really that noteworthy on the whole. And that's why it's better to have a lot of small businesses in your town than just a few great ones, a few giant combines, as the International Combine Volkswagen is an example of. Many small businesses are what we want. We want you, my listener, to start your own business. Start your own business now. We face a national economic disaster. It's ahead, and we'll have more reservoir of strength if we have many, many more small businesses than just a few giants such as Volkswagen.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
After this cold and frosty start, we've had lots of sunshine for your Wednesday. A nice afternoon, a little warmer, highs back into the upper 40s. Tonight, fair, lows 28 to 31. For Thursday, becoming partly cloudy, still dry, back into the lower 50s with a few showers marching in late Thursday night through Friday morning. It's refund season. Come into your local H&R Block office and let their experienced tax professionals help you get every dollar you deserve. Your maximum refund is guaranteed at H&R Block. And I'm Swargene 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Hoare. On AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.